It's a journey thousands of UK troops once made to a part of Afghanistan that will live long in British military history. I'm heading to Camp SHORABAK, once known as Camp Bastion, deep in the Helmand Desert. These days it's an Afghan base, but here too, inside their own tiny corner of America, is a contingent of US Marines, sent here last April to try and help the battered Afghan Army hold on to Helmand. The first US Marines arrived in Afghanistan back in 2001, sent here by President George Bush in the wake of 9/11. The then Brigadier General Jim Mattis, now the US Secretary of Defense, led 1,000 US Marines into the Helmand Desert to establish America's first base here. At one point, there were 20,000 Marines on the ground in this country, leading some at home to nickname it Marinistan. British forces handed northern Helmand to the US Marines in 2010, and 4 years later NATO combat troops left the country. Security transferred to their Afghan counterparts. But by 2016 that security was fast evaporating. Musa Qala, Nadali and Sangin, a town that cost 100 British lives, were back in Taliban hands, and the provincial capital, Lashkargah, once a British HQ, was close to falling. In the town of Marja, 2 battalions of Afghan troops were completely cut off and could only be resupplied by air. A small task force of US troops were urgently sent in to train the Afghans, and last April they were bolstered by 300 Marines, here to advise and assist and help the Afghan forces turn the tide against the Taliban.
The 215th Corps, the 505th Zone of the Afghan National Police, along with the Afghan National Civil Order Police and the Afghan Border Police, all went into offensive operations, kind of all hands on deck here in Helmand, and they started to push out that security bubble, starting in the Cumberbund, or the center of Helmand, pushing north, pushing south, north towards Gereshk, up the Highway 611, which runs generally from Lashkargah through Gereshk, up into Sangin, all the way to Khogiani. It's gotten to the point now where even a year ago you couldn't drive up and down the 611 running from north to south from Lashkargah to Sangin, and now 2nd Brigade of the 215th Corps has done such a phenomenal job in pushing out security in that area that they can conduct patrols up and down the 611 on an almost daily basis with very little impact from the Taliban.
The Marines are based inside Camp SHORAB. Most come from the 8th Marine Regiment based out of Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. A short drive away by armoured car and you reach the Regional Training Centre, a complex of classrooms where the Marines teach Afghan troops, many of them preparing to return to the battlefield. These soldiers are a mix of senior NCOs and junior officers, and in this class they're being taught how to become instructors themselves.
What I'm doing here is teaching them how to teach a class, because these guys have never taught a class before. So I'm giving them the tools and the knowledge to be able to be successful in giving them the ability to teach a class to soldiers.
In the past few years, Afghan forces have suffered crippling casualty rates. In 2016, 6,800 soldiers and police were killed, while last year 2,500 lost their lives in the first 4 months of the year. The Afghan government no longer publishes the number of dead and injured, but among these men, it wasn't hard to find soldiers who'd lost comrades.
There's been some experiences that I lost some of my colleagues. We were ambushed and I lost some of my colleagues. I was injured myself, and we also lost some of the injured soldiers and NCOs and officers who were fighting against the Taliban alongside with me.
But despite the losses, these Afghan troops told me they still believe they'll win.
It is very confident to say that the Taliban will be defeated, because we have Marines now, we have the American and coalition forces back in Afghanistan. And as much as the Taliban will tend to fight against the people of Afghanistan, we will fight them, and they will be defeated, and peace will be sustained in Afghanistan.
Like the British, the US Marines took heavy casualties in Helmand, losing 350 men here. While their mission now is focused on training, they do occasionally take part in combat operations. In May, they used this rocket system known as HIMARS to kill 50 Taliban leaders as they gathered in a compound in Musa Qala. The Marines here have a broad mix of experience and youth.
Are you going to be doing the NCR tour?
Bob Krieger joined the Corps 19 years ago. As well as Afghanistan, he served multiple combat tours of Iraq and fought in the Battle of Fallujah.
It was the new era of the IED. It was rough on a lot of people. Just looking at the Marines, a lot of them just getting beaten on. And the op tempo for deployments was you're back for 6, then you deploy again. Just trying to keep the pressure on the enemy. Dealing with death and, you know, the people you've lost, the loved ones you've lost, you definitely have a different mindset. But out here, this time around, out here, we're more in the train, advise, and assist mission. And my job is to ensure the morale, welfare of the Marines under my charge, making sure they're getting paid right, administratively everything is correct, awards, and just help prepare them for the future.
Last year, 3 American soldiers were killed and 11 wounded in so-called green-on-blue attacks by rogue Afghan troops. To protect the advisors, the Marines have a squad of guardian angels, and in charge of one of them is a 25-year-old from Mississippi, a young man who'd one day like to become a state governor.
I understand from talking to the Major, you've got a kind of life plan set ahead of you. You've got some ambitions. I mean, tell me about those.
So some of my ambitions include attending law school when I get back from Afghanistan, sir. After that, I hope to move to Washington, D.C. and get my feet wet in policy and constitutional law and see where that takes me.
SHORAB is a 24-hour base from downtime on the basketball court.
There we go. Shoulder dig.
To night operations supporting Afghan forces. It never stops.
10617.
Tonight, this mortar team are firing illuminating flares to light up the battlefield and hopefully drive the Taliban away.
Hang on 3, charge 3.
Fire.
We're out here to just support the Afghan National Army with, as we send out illumination out there, it goes ahead and lights up the battle space for them so that they can see what's going on there, as well as helps deter enemy movement out there because of the light that we're shining out there.
The most senior US Marine in Helmand is Brigadier General Ben Watson. I sent him a list of questions and he agreed to answer all of them on camera, including this. Did he believe NATO combat troops, including the British, left too soon?
As a military officer, I do. I mean, I know those are normally political decisions, and so I won't attempt to, to break that apart, in this kind of forum. But from a military perspective, we absolutely left too soon. We left the Afghan security forces with more than they could handle, and I think we saw the catastrophic results over the next year or two, and that's what we've been battling to help them take back ever since.
Since the Marines arrived, the Afghans have retaken Marja and Nad Ali. Now a district is also back in government hands, and security has been widened around Lashkar. But monitoring bodies say 43% of Afghanistan's districts are still either under Taliban control or facing attacks by insurgents. 17 years on, the mission here is still costing US taxpayers $45 billion a year. And after initially dismissing the idea, the Trump administration is now reportedly considering talking to the Taliban to try and break the stalemate. In the meantime, international forces will remain here in a country that still seems a long way from peace.